On October 20th, during Stansberry's most highly anticipated event of the year, renowned analyst Matt McCall made a bold new prediction and said that despite everything you're seeing in the news, supply shortages, inflation, a so-called aging bull market, and everything else going on, there's an even bigger story most investors are missing. For a short while longer, you could see exactly what Matt's predicting and what he thinks you need to do in response. And when you check out the replay of this event, you'll also get the name of a tiny stock he believes could go up 10 times, 50 times, and possibly even as high as 100 times in the years ahead. To hear Matt's big bold prediction for yourself and learn how to get the names of Matt's 3 favorite crypto plays, simply head to mattprediction.com. Again, that's mattprediction.com. Check it out for yourself. All right, let's get to today's segment. Hi, this is Daniela Camboni, and welcome back to StansberryInvestor.com. We're talking the Federal Reserve today. Should it continue to exist or not? A controversial topic. Well, if you sit on the side of the fence that feels the Fed needs to be audited, or to the extreme, there needs to be a complete abolishment of the Fed, then you are probably influenced and read one of the most popular books pushing this theory. It's the 1994 bestseller, The Creature from Jekyll Island. And today we have the author of this book that many would consider a financial Bible. So please welcome to the show, G. Edward Griffin. So nice to be with you. Welcome, Edward.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and a great introduction. I'm going to have to pin it on my bathroom mirror.
Well, you are most welcome on the show. I know you're considered to be a controversial figure by many, but by some of other guests I've interviewed, including Robert Kiyosaki, Dr. Ron Paul, your work is highly influential, especially in matters regarding the Fed.
This has to do with the criminal operations called the Federal Reserve Bank. This is my friend's book here, The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. And I wasn't a good student, but I do study.
So for audience members who may be new to you, let's just talk a little bit about what the role you see, well, I guess the role you don't think the Fed should be playing in people's lives.
Well, okay, the role it should not be playing in people's lives is the role it is playing, of course. And what is that role? And it's hard to describe, because if you just say it bluntly, most people will look at you like you're some kind of a tinfoil hat person. But I'm used to that, so I don't mind that look, as long as I have a moment or two to explain. So what's the role it's playing? It's playing the role of our masters. And that's what? What do you mean? The Federal Reserve is our master? Who ever heard of such a thing? It's a government agency, isn't it? Well, no, it's not a government agency. So what is it? And this leads you down the rabbit hole. The Federal Reserve System is a cartel. It's no different than no different than an oil cartel or banana cartel. It's a banking cartel, and that's a kind of a shocker to most people, to realize that the system that's controlling our money, that issues our money in the name of the nation, is a private institution, completely a private institution. And if you understand the history, its origins going way back to 1910 through 1913, during the period when they were selling the concept to Congress and to the American people, during that time, these bankers got together and decided that they needed to intervene in Congress, because Congress was getting a lot of pressure from the people to produce a bill, a law, to control those big bad banks. They're ruining the economy. Their banks were folding. People were losing their investments. They had their money in the banks, and the banks would fold. They lost everything they had. And there was a hue and cry for banking reform bill. So the bankers decided wisely that, hey, if we're going to have a banking reform bill, what are we going to do? Just sit around and wait and see how it turns out? No. Let's have a meeting and let's figure out how we can write the banking reform bill to our best interests. And that's what they did. And that, of course, is the lead up to the name for my book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, because Jekyll Island is a real island. It's off the coast of Georgia. Mm-hmm. And back in those days, it was a resort. Well, it still is a resort island, but in those days, it was an exclusive resort island owned by the very bankers we're talking about and some of their industrialist friends. It was a resort island, very elegant, still there, of course. Anyway, so they went to this island where they were away from the prying eyes of the world, and they crafted up their cartel agreement. and they took it back to Washington, D.C., and if you can imagine taking a big fat eraser and erasing the words from the top of the paper that says cartel agreement, and then they carefully write in Federal Reserve Act. And then they took it to Congress, and they cajoled those idiot guys there that were there in Congress, and they passed the cartel agreement into law, and so now we have to abide by it because it's law, and if we don't, we go to prison, which is why people think it's a government agency, because only government can put you in prison, right? Well, no, not right. Not if you're very wealthy and very clever, you can buy governments. So now we get back to the answer to your question, what is it? Today, it controls the money system. It controls who gets money, what the interest rates are. All the important elements of commerce are controlled by this private group in the name of the government, and it's become so powerful over the years that the role has completely reversed. It was created by the government. It was, in other words, a contract issued by the federal government, just like the states issue contracts or legalize corporations and so forth at the state level. This is like a national corporation that was created by the national government. And so the government created it, but now over the years, the role of master and servant has been reversed, and now we come to the amazing and horrible conclusion that the government doesn't control the banks control the government. So now we answer the question, what do we have here that it shouldn't be? And that is it. It is our master, and most people don't know it.
Well, excellent summary. Thank you for that. And I would say that, people who prescribe to your theory would echo that and argue that it's a group of totalitarian bureaucrats who are really responsible for the degradation of the 20th and 21st century. Which brings us to today, and what a lengthy narrative is happening in the Fed landscape these days. Curious to get your thoughts on inflation, on the state of economy. Where are we at?
Another really deep question. Where are we now? Well, we're poised on the precipice of a major transition of proportions equal to the transition from a normal government to a controlled government, such as what happened back in 1910. That was a major step when the Federal Reserve was passed into law. Now we're about to make another step of that magnitude, and everything will change, I believe. And, well, how would it change? Won't the Federal Reserve continue as it is? And in my view, the answer is no. We don't have to worry so much anymore about abolishing the Fed, because the Fed is about to metamorph into something quite different, and it won't be there anyway in the form as we know it. And it's hard to imagine, but it'll even be worse. And that's the thing. What will it be? Well, they're transitioning now as hard as they can to a new monetary system where people like us, or ordinary people around the world, we won't have money in our pockets. There'll only be a digital currency, and there'll be a central bank digital currency. It's not like Bitcoin or some private coin. These would be nationally issued and internationally sanctioned currencies, and they're digital currencies, not an awful lot different from credit card money, which is digital also. But in this case, once they achieve their goal, there will be no more credit cards, so to speak. All the private systems of money will be replaced by this one monopolistic, one world, literally, a monetary system, and it'll be totally controlled by the banks, not by the governments. And every transaction you make, all the way from buying a packet of gum, to buying a car, to making an endowment to somebody, anything of any size, will have to go through the currency of the digital currency owned by the central banks. Now, I'll come to the end of that one. What's so different about that? Well, the difference is that you have no other place to go, and you'll never have control of your own money without permission of the banks, because it has to clear through their computers. And if they don't like you for any reason, and I can think of a few that they might not like me, they could just throw a switch, and I won't be able to have any money for anything, which puts me out on the street with my hat on the sidewalk begging for food and donations to my overhead.
I'm happy you brought up central bank digital currencies. It is the future. And to that point, where do you hide? How do you protect yourself? How do you protect your privacy? Does that not build a bigger case for assets like the cryptocurrencies, gold, silver?
Well, I think it builds a good case for all of these alternative assets. Yes, anything other than currency, because we're not going to have our currency anymore. If we have anything we now have in US dollars or any other national currency, in the very near future will disappear. It'll be transformed into central bank or digital currencies. So those will all disappear. Now we'll have the private blockchains, perhaps, where we can still trade with each other at a local level, a limited level. But if we want to pay the rent or buy a cup of coffee or buy a gallon of gas or anything like that, no, we're out of luck. So that's the change I'm talking about. And so, yeah, back to your question, do we need assets outside of that system? Absolutely. What are the best assets? Well, that's another issue, and I have my own views on that. I'm really not a good investment manager. I understand the mechanisms, but people have different opinions. But I don't see how you can beat the bullion market, silver and gold. It's pretty time tested. So if when in doubt, go with what's been tested, I would say.
Right. So owning physical gold, physical silver, and be outside the banking system.
Absolutely. That's it. That's the short answer, isn't it? Right there. Own something physical, anything physical, actually, as long as it's marketable. I often joked about the idea that with the coming crisis, let's call it, we're always in a crisis, that word is even worn out now, with the coming catastrophe in the economy, maybe it'd be a good idea if you had the reserves to buy a warehouse of cheap white wine, for example,
Well, how far out is that coming catastrophe for you? We've spoken, with many experts who have called for a correction, a credible correction on the stock market, yet it keeps getting bigger and bigger and going and going. How does this play out?
Well, two questions. How does it play out and when? That's always a question I have been very unable to predict. I mean, I have a terrible record of when. What? I've got a great record, but don't count on my dates because they never turn out.
What then? What does it look like? What does the correction look like? What does the catastrophe look like for you?
Well, it depends. It depends on who wins the contest for control of the system. The banks are pretty much in control now, and they're very confident that they will maintain control well into the future. If we follow that scenario, then it's easy to see what we're headed toward, and it's not a pretty picture at all. I think anybody's wildest nightmare would be pretty close to that. I mean, we're looking at a world, at best, we're looking at a world that would be like everybody being in the military. In other words, you have everything provided for you. You have your health care, your clothing, your food, your shelter, everything you need, provided you follow the rules. And if you step out of line, well, you're in the brig. And if you really step out of the line, you're lined up against the wall and shot. So that's, and we all have rank then. There are the generals, and there are the sergeants, and the buck privates, and all of that sort of thing. And you wear uniforms, and you recognize each other by sight as to what your rank is, and the whole system depends on authority. That's where we're headed, at best. Now, it could be even worse than that, but that would be the basic system as I see where we're headed. Now, if you and I and people who see the other option and understand what's going on, if we are able to marshal the forces of society and turn this around in the last minute of the battle, well, then we could have a very rosy picture, because the chaos that we will have to go through in the meantime will leave such an indelible record, such a lesson to be learned, that I don't think mankind would ever forget it, and they would never want to return to that again.
I asked Dr. Ron Paul, who was my guest earlier this week, this question. I'll pose you the same one, because you both believe in abolishing the Fed. The Fed should not exist. Are you optimistic with movements such as what we've seen with Bitcoin, the popularity of Bitcoin, of the new generation who wants a decentralized system? Are you optimistic that that day would come where we wouldn't need a central bank, where people would understand this?
Well, I am cautiously optimistic, and I put that word there because I understand that to a large extent, many of the people who are so enthusiastic and rightfully enthusiastic about cryptocurrencies are motivated by the idea of a decentralized system and lack of control by both governments and banks. But I also recognize that the larger is that, hey, I want to get in on the profits. Most people would philosophically say, yes, oh, it's a good idea. I wish we could get rid of this control. But when it comes to parting with money and investing in something, that's a different story. Most people, and this is true, most people who are actually buying cryptocurrencies today are not buying them because they're expecting to use them as a currency of exchange, but because they want to make a profit. They say, I don't want to miss out on this. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way, but I'm saying that the focus really, if they didn't think that it was a chance to make some big money, I don't think most people would be in the cryptocurrency market right now. And that's just it's a natural fact. In fact, myself, I say that myself. I have bought some crypto because I don't want to miss out either. I'm not betting the family farm on it, but I think, gee, if this thing is going up, so it'd be stupid not to participate in the elevator ride, you know?
Let me ask you this. You're the founder also of the Red Pill conference expo that takes place, taking place this year, November 6th to 7th in Lafayette, Louisiana. It keeps gaining popularity, right? And you said at the beginning that a lot of people look at you and think, oh, you have a tinfoil hat and you're labeled as controversial by many. But to others, it's an appeal. It's another road, right? It's another way of thinking. Have you seen a trend as to what people are searching when they come to this conference? More so post-pandemic, you would say?
Oh yes, it's a definite trend, and I have to say the trend goes back quite a distance, but it's gaining momentum now. It's really got some legs now. Back when I started, I mean, way back in the Pleistocene era, when I became, activated and realized what's going on in the world, and discovered that I had a crusader gene, and decided I wanted to get out of the corporate world and really make a difference in the future of mankind. I didn't know I had those thoughts and drives in me until I realized I was able to see what the future looked like. But now you don't have to do a lot of reading and thinking about the future or what it's going to look like, because it's here. It's here. The things that I was worried about back in the 1960s and 70s, most of them are already here. They're visible. Maybe they haven't gone to full term yet, but people are being thrown out of work. I mean, now more and more people never dreamed they would be totally dependent on the government for livelihood. I mean, those numbers are rising, and the amount of money that's being created out of nothing in order to get people on the welfare so they'd be totally subservient to their masters and all of that, and then the crash of the economy, the depression in productivity, the shortages of food and supplies, all of these things now are here. We don't have to say it's going to be that way if we don't do something. They're here. So now it's easier to wake up. You don't have to have much imagination. Just look out your window. So I'm encouraged by the fact that people are waking up, but I'm a little bit discouraged because even so, many people, they're waking up to the pain. They want to be relieved of the pain and the anguish, but they don't yet, and I think this is where we come in, but they yet don't understand fully what's behind it. And I'm afraid that people in that state of non-informed awareness, but complaint, I'm mad as hell, I'm going to do something about it. They don't know what to do about it. For those people, they're sitting ducks for some demagogue to come along, the guy on the white horse, and he'll say what they want to hear him say, but he'll be no better than the guy before. And false leaders arise at moments like this.
I'm assuming you have a game plan. I know when I spoke with Robert Kiyosaki, Gerald Chalente, they've all shared that they have an exit strategy game plan if crisis really does hit. You mentioned owning physical gold, silver, being outside of the banking system, but do you have like a plan of action ready?
Well, I have a plan, yes, and to some extent I try to follow it personally, but my plan is bigger than just myself and my family, and I don't want to denigrate that, because we all need to take care of ourselves and our families first. And I have nothing new to offer on that. We all know we've got to get out of the money system, get whatever savings we have into tangible assets, as we've discussed a moment ago, and then we have to find our community, find our friends, and know who you can trust, and we've got to support each other. We've got to have food on hand. We've got to be independent, have our independent security, independent food growth, independent communications, all of these things. That's all defensive. But as they say, the purely defensive is doomed to defeat. I'm looking ahead to victory. And all the things I just mentioned are defensive and do not lead to victory. They just prolong the ultimate surrender. So my plan is, how do we actually turn this thing around? And that's one of the reasons we have this thing called the Red Pill Expo, Red Pill University, Freedom Force International, because we do have a plan for taking the initiative and changing society to rise out of the ashes, so to speak, the phoenix out of the ashes.
Let me ask you, I started the show by saying your book was influential to many guests on this show. Is there a book you read that you would say greatly influenced your viewpoints?
Oh yeah, there are several. In fact, I used to have a little short list of books that, in fact, I sort of coerced my kids into reading them if they wanted their allowance. But one of them, of course, let me see if I start from the beginning. I think one of the most fundamental books at the ideological level is Frederick Bastiat's book, The Law. And I even made a recording of that years ago. I pretended like I was Frederick Bastiat and speaking before the French Assembly. Had more fun recording it than you can imagine. I would put the echo in to make it sound like I was in a room. And I was reading from his book, of course, but I was trying to get very, very emotional, like Frederick Bastiat must have been. But he laid it all out way back, back in the beginning, when collectivism, or some people call it socialism, communism, and fascism, but it's all, peel off the labels, it's collectivism underneath it. It was just becoming popular in Europe, and particularly in France. And so he was speaking against the evils of this collectivist mindset. And every issue he was laid out so well in that little thin book called The Law. So I recommend that one. And then Henry Grady Weaver's book called The Mainspring of Human Progress. It was written by an engineer, but he was a great historian. And he just showed that throughout history, those moments in history where mankind flourished. There was great development in music and the arts and architecture and math and standard of living and freedom. All these things were like little bubbles popping up out of the pot throughout history. And he looked at what was underneath the bubble. What was different about those periods? And he found out that in every case it was the size of government control. Now, some of them were totalitarians, but they were very weak governments, and they left people alone. And it was always in those periods of time when government left people alone that we had so many advances in the good things in life. I thought that's a great lesson of history.
Thank you for sharing those two with us, Edward. I guess my final thought, I know you focus a lot on health and taking care of oneself, of yourself. Is there anything you can share you do on a daily basis to keep your energy levels high?
Oh, I'm the least qualified person for that, but people ask me that a lot because of my ancienticity.
I mean, you look fantastic. That's why I'm sharing. What is the secret here?
There's no secret. Let's start off with that. The secret is that there's no secret. Everything I do, everything I believe in is stuff that's out there. Everybody knows it. They just don't do it. And I didn't do it for a long time either. What's the it? Well, okay, the it is pretty simple. It's not a secret. You've got to get out of the toxic world. You've got to get the toxins out of your life, okay? They're killers. I mean, everybody knows the list. Tobacco, booze, chemicals in your food, fluorine in the water. I mean, everywhere you go, the toxic in the air, in your food, and electromagnetic radiation is toxic. I mean, we know the list, okay? To the best of your ability, get them out of your life. Get away from them. The next thing is, okay, you got rid of the negative stuff. Where's the positive stuff? That means full nutrition. I don't think health comes out of a test tube. I'm not a great fan of the patented medicines. I mean, I never was that way before I even knew why. So I'm the kind of guy, if I go to some place and they want to take my medical history, they ask me, well, what meds are you on? And I said, well, meds? And I'm not on any meds. No, they said, you don't understand. What medications do you take? Look, Let me explain this to you. I don't take any, all right? And so that's the other thing. And finally, everybody knows this one too. A little exercise now and then doesn't hurt. And that's it. That's it. Nothing mysterious.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that with us. Need to get some of that water you're drinking, though. Edward,
Okay.
it was a real treat. Your Red Pill Expo taking place in November, Lafayette, Louisiana.
Yes, yes. I urge everybody to come. Of course, we know most people cannot actually make the trip, but we have a live stream for that.
There you go, folks.
So if you want to see all about it, see who's on the program, what the topics are, it's redpillexpo.org.
There you go. Thank you so much. Good luck with the show. And I hope to meet you in person one day, okay?
Okay, that would be a delight. Thank you for inviting me.
Awesome.
All right,
And
bye-bye.
thank you so much for watching. We'll have much more for you, so be sure to stay tuned to StansburyInvestor.com. In the meantime, don't forget to sign up for premier content you can't get anywhere else at DanielaCambone.com. That's it for me. Thanks for watching.